welcome into the Matt Bernier Show, part of the In the Money Media Network. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is episode 32 for Tuesday, September the 15th, 2020. However you listen or watch, thank you for doing so. Many ways to find the podcast, whether you are over on YouTube. All you need to do, search in the bar up at the top, Matt Bernier Show. This one will pop up along with the 31 prior episodes. But if you are over there, make sure that you not only subscribe, make sure that the bell icon is lit up, make sure that you give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and you comment beneath the video player, whether it's just overall opinions, something specifically discussed here on the show. If you want to be involved in the Friday feature coming up next week, be in the position that Jerry Richman is in this episode, and you'll hear from Jerry here momentarily. Again, beneath the video player on YouTube is the place to do that. If you listen audio only, like many of you do, you have your sort of standard spots for your podcast listening. Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. You can also head on over to inthemoneypodcast.com, where you can find all the latest from the flagship show, the In the Money Players Podcast, the Racing Picks Players Podcast. You can also find my analysis over on racingpicks.com throughout the week. You can find Talk Racing to Me with Naomi Tucker. You can find JK Plus One with Jonathan Kinchin. You can find the Redboard Rewind with Spencer Luganbuehl. You can find Nick Luck's daily podcast. You can find a million things. You also find written content over there. InTheMoneyPodcast.com is where you need to go. You can also find the Horse Player Happy Hours. We're going to have one of those coming back here on, I'm not going to say it yet. It's either Thursday or Friday this week. I think it might be Friday. But easy enough way to find that out. Follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt, or follow the boss at Looms Boldly, PTF. Or, even better yet, Breeders' Cup, at Breeders' Cup. A million ways for you to find content available from the In the Money team. As far as this week's episode goes, going to dive into the Friday feature. If you are trying to win and be involved, come on the show, chop it up for a little bit, be in the position that Jerry Richman is in this episode. You need to leave your selection for Gulfstream Park's 7th race this week. 5 furlong turf sprint, non-winners of one other than. Looks like the weather's going to cooperate. Leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. It's the only place I'll take your official entry. If you win, I'll contact you, and we will do this thing again next Monday. I'll call you up over the weekend, try to figure something out. I won't call you. I'll contact you in the comment section, tell you to email me, and we'll make something work. Speaking of this weekend, I believe it's 5 o'clock both days, but I don't know for certain. 5 o'clock on Saturday, 5 o'clock on Sunday, NBCSN. I will be involved with some Breeders' Cup Win and You're In action in conjunction with TVG. So looking forward to that. It'll be from somewhere in our humble abode, but that'll be on Saturday and Sunday this week. NBCSN, I believe, at 5 o'clock. Big sporting events this weekend, and that's also sort of what we will transition to. We'll start with the Friday feature. I'll come back, a couple little Q&A, little pieces here and there. I'll talk about the Classic division as a whole, because it's dovetailing off of one of the pieces from Q&A. And then we'll transition into something that some of you will have absolutely no interest in, and some of you will. And one way or the other, it's fun. It's that time of year. U.S. Open for golf. Those of you that don't know, big golf guy. Almost as big, if not more so than with the horses. This week, our national championship. So going to give you a few golfers that maybe you want to get down on while you still have some time. And then also we'll take a look at some of the lines coming up for this weekend from the NFL. Week 1 is in the books. The only thing I put out there publicly was a 4-team money line parlay. And unfortunately the Cowboys stunk, and it didn't really matter because the Colts had already just completely, the bet earlier in the day. The Gardner Minshew. Never mind. It is what it is. We'll take a look at some lines later on. But first things first, let's dive into the Friday feature. Again, Jerry Richman is the guest this week. If you want to be in Jerry's position next week for the Friday feature, you're going to leave your selection beneath the video player on YouTube. It is for Gulfstream Park, race number 7. Without further ado, here is Jerry and his analysis for this week's Friday feature. All right, after a little bit of a hiatus, let's call it a 1-week post-derby sort of hangover, whatever you want to call it. The Friday feature is back, and Jerry Richman had won the contest a few weeks ago, and unfortunately, again, I kind of got tied up that one weekend, couldn't make it happen. Then we had the Derby and all that other jazz. So Jerry has kindly enough sort of donated his time on a Tuesday as opposed to a Monday when we typically do this thing. First things first, Jerry, thank you for doing this. How are you? Give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Hi, Matt. First of all, thank you for doing this for all us weekend warriors. It's nice to have a little voice. I've been playing horses for as long as I can remember. One of my college buddies' family owned Crypto Clearance, ran the 87 Triple Crown, got more into it, met a couple more degenerate buddies in college, and we actually started claiming some horses right after we graduated, some cheap 5,000 claimers, and going to Arlington, Hawthorne, Sportsman's for 30 some years.
I was going to say, this feels like we've had a number of folks from all different parts of the country, which has been a nice sort of additive or nice little wrinkle to this entire thing. But we've had a few folks in that sort of Chicago, Illinois area. Is that more or less where you're based?
Yeah, I mean, I live about 8 minutes from Arlington Park.
So it's a perfect.
And actually, Howard Kravitz was on a few weeks ago. Is a good friend of mine.
Oh, is that right?
So, yeah.
It's all in the family. I love it. This is good stuff. Now, before we dive into the Friday feature for this weekend, for those of you looking to play, it is the 7th at Gulfstream on Friday. It's a 5-furlong turf sprint. We'll dive into the details of that here in a little bit. A couple things, just sort of your overall thoughts and opinions on what we saw in the Kentucky Derby just a couple weeks back now. And unfortunately, we found out the news about Honor AP being retired. What are your overall thoughts on the 3-year-olds in the Derby as a whole?
I actually thought handicapping, looking at the form, I actually thought it was a really weak field, I thought except for Tiz the Law. I actually was a big Authentic fan, but I unfortunately listened to about 20 podcasts a couple of weeks, and nobody liked him. Nobody thought could go a mile and a quarter. And so I kind of used Tiz the Law over Authentic with a bunch of long shots. And, I should have stuck with my guns like you did with She Dares the Devil.
Yeah, and that's it's one of those things. It's a tough lesson to learn where you want to hear what everyone else thinks and what everyone else's opinions are, but at the same time, there's always that danger of being swayed off of what your gut is telling you and what you like. And I think this is sort of a good learning piece going forward for everyone that listens and watches, that you can listen to people that you trust and respect their opinions, but when push comes to shove, go with what you believe in.
Right. I mean, I thought the Haskell, everyone thought he got tired, and Baffert gave an excuse that he got lazy. Usually when a horse opens up by 3, he looked like he was going to win by 5 or 6, and if he had done that, he would have been 3-1 in the Derby. But he supposedly Mike Smith didn't get him right like Baffert wanted, and he got lazy, and he won by a nose, and nobody liked him.
And that was my kind of logic. Look, and again, I make no bones about it. I didn't pick the horse for the Derby, but I did look at that race in the Haskell and say it's not a matter of him getting tired. It's a matter of him being a goofball. He's always been very immature out there looking around doing X, Y, and Z. And I just felt like there was a really big gap between he and New York Traffic. And many people looked at New York Traffic and said, well, maybe he's got that piece. And who knows, maybe he'll turn into something a little bit more as we go down the line. But I just didn't think that gap was nearly as tight as many people made it out to be. And even having said that, I couldn't convince myself that he was necessarily a Derby horse. I thought he would be more of a Preakness type. We'll find out. Maybe he will be a Preakness type, but he was certainly a Kentucky Derby horse as well. As far as the Friday feature is concerned here, race number 7 down at Gulfstream Park. I know Belmont's getting ready to go, but they haven't drawn the races yet, just in time for us to do this. So Gulfstream kind of falls into this thing by default. 5/8 on the grass, non-winners of 1 other than. You've got a couple of MTOs, but it looks like, knock on wood, the weather should be okay down in South Florida on Friday afternoon. Before we go into any specifics as far as horses are concerned, how do you approach these sort of 5-furlong turf sprints? I've spoken about it at length that I really don't enjoy them, and I have a hard time figuring them out, making heads or tails of them. Where do you land on these?
I fall in your category. I don't know anyone really who likes turf sprints or actually has a good return on betting turf sprints. I did have Belvoir Bay in the Breeders' Cup, but that's probably the exception, not the rule there. Certain tracks you just can't close in 5.5 furlong races. You have to be within a couple of lengths of the lead, and I think Gulfstream's one of those tracks where the turf sprints you don't want to be too far back.
Especially when you have a track like Gulfstream where they more or less run continuously. I know they'll have those, those few weeks where they go over to Gulfstream Park West and give the main turf a little bit of a breather. But for the most part, they've run consistently on this grass course since December of last year. So you're looking at, I know some of our friends, I won't name names, but they refer to it as dirt turf, because it's not proper grass at this point anymore. How can it be with the heat and all the things that go on and the amount of races that are run down there? It's just very difficult to keep that. And well, let's use your sort of hometown track there. It's never going to look like Arlington's turf, put it that way.
That is a pristine, beautiful turf course, and I do really well there. And it's, unfortunately, I haven't been there. I haven't been there this year because the racing's just horrible with the purses and stuff. So and what's going on there has just been it's been really hard to watch since I guess I've been going there for 30 years. So it's really hard to.
Arlington was kind of the first place for me when I first really started getting into it. Million Day was one of the first days that I was really exposed to from like let's call it an international standpoint, where you had O'Brien sending horses over, and you had these horses that I wasn't familiar with, but they were coming on and they were winning races, and it really started to make me approach the grass racing differently on the biggest stage anyway, where when these Europeans come over here, even if they're sort of the B or C stringers, you've got to take them seriously.
Yeah, speaking of Europeans, I said I used to own horses, so I had an owner's pass. I used to go to the Million every year, and I would just go in T-shirt, sandals, and shorts. And they had right behind the winner's circle, they had what they call a port, like an owner's box, but it was just like a tent. So I just said, "Oh, is this for the owners of the Million?" They're like, "No, it's for any track owners." So I showed them my pass. So I'm sitting there, and I actually was standing next to the owners of, I think it was Silvano, a German horse. This is back in like 2001 or so. And, they're celebrating, and I was just sitting there dressed like, an idiot. And they're all in suits, and they just won the Million. So it was pretty funny.
It's the beauty of horse racing, though, and I feel like that piece is lost a little bit in the midst of these big events, and this year notwithstanding. But these bigger events, you see everyone all dressed up and this, that, and the other thing. There are just as many, if not more, folks who are owners or involved with horses that show up at the track, to your point, in flip-flops and shorts and a T-shirt and whatever the case may be. And I think that's a piece that kind of gets lost in the narrative that we try to spin with sort of the modern day horse racing aspect. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I think people now just think that every owner is a millionaire, billionaire, and you got to spend hundreds of thousands, not millions, to have a good horse. But it's we claimed horses for $5,000. We had a lot of fun.
And that's kind of why I looked at a story like California Chrome's, not including the situation that happened there after the Belmont, but it was such a different story. It was a unique story where it's not the millionaires and billionaires that are showing up in the winner's circle collecting another check and whatever the case may be. It's sort of your low-profile folks who enjoy going to the racetrack, and they happen to put some money together, and here you go. You got a horse who was bred to be a 5-furlong turf claimer, and instead he turns into one of the greats of the past 10 to 15 years. So it's funny how things like that work. Speaking of bred to be 5-furlong turf claimer type, these aren't necessarily claimers. Again, non-winners of one other than the 7th race at Gulfstream on Friday. I think it's a pretty interesting group of horses, though, here, Jerry, simply because, you've got a horse like Joyful Heart on the outside who, from a numbers standpoint, makes all the sense in the world, but we're talking about a pretty significant turn back in distance here. I mean, what do you make of the big turn back? I know this horse did win on the turn back 3 starts back, but, is that sort of a concern for you with these type of races? And you brought up the running style situation. You would imagine this horse, even being forwardly placed going longer, probably going to come from a little bit farther off of it going 5/8, no?
I think the Joyful Heart will be one of the trailers in this race, trying to close. And I think there's 2 or 3 speed horses. I think Fully Loaded's got to get a perfect trip if he sits right off of the Shoshani Brave and Go Gone Gone. And I just don't want to close from too far back. And I don't like, mile 16th to 5 furlongs is, you got quick and pretty fast there.
Now, when you get into looking at the horses who project to be forward, ultimately, how do you how do you differentiate between them? Let's say you've got 2 or 3 horses that you think are going to be in positions that are advantageous to or conducive to winning in a race like this. How do you then separate? How do you split the difference between them?
Well, I try and look and see if one of them is coming out of maybe a better race. I'm more of a class handicapper, so if someone's running faster against better horses, I'm hoping that he'll put away the cheaper speed, so to say. But these are all kind of similar horses here in this race in terms of the speed. And they're blistering. They're running 20 and 42, 21, 43. I mean, it's gonna be a fast pace there.
I was going to say, they're going to be throwing it down. There's no question about it. You brought up a horse like Go Gone Gone, who goes out for high percentage connections. The horse has not particularly run well at Gulfstream Park in the past, 1 for 19 overall, but that's been with different connections. Now we come here, second time on the turf, going out for Georgina Baxter. How do you approach a horse like this, who on paper has had his share of difficulties at this sort of configuration, at this track, but do you look at him as if he's just an entirely new horse with a new outfit?
Possibly, but I just think this is going to be a little tough situation with him, with the 4 horse inside of him, probably be in front of him, and the fully loaded right on his flank. He's not going to have a breather, and he's going to have a really tough trip, I think. I really don't like him to hit the board. I just think he might be improving. He might be with better connections, but I think this is not the best situation for him pace-wise.
You brought up a horse like Fully Loaded, a winner most recently in that state-bred N1X condition. That was first start off of a rather lengthy layoff. And coming back in those 5 furlong turf sprints, or any kind of a sprint, frankly, I feel like many people, sort of a common thought is coming off of a layoff, going shorter is going to be easier than going longer, when in reality you need to work so much harder going shorter that layoff can actually catch up to you a little bit more going the shorter distance as opposed to the route races, the mile and a 16th, whatever the case may be. This horse successfully came back off the bench and got the job done, going 5/8. Now we step up into open N1X company. Overall thoughts on Fully Loaded?
When I first looked at this race, I thought Fully Loaded should probably win. Again, sitting the perfect trip right off the 2 speeds, getting the first run on the closers. But again, I am concerned. He was out. That was first race in 4 months. And, you make a good point there that maybe I might have taken some out of him working a 5 furlong race going that fast. Might take a little more out of him than a little more leisurely mile or something. So I actually got him going. I got him second here. I'm hoping that the 1 horse on the rail, the lightly raced, Get the Money Bernie, can run him down.
Okay, and let's talk about Get the Money Bernie here. Goes out for Saffie Joseph Jr.'s barn, another high percentage outfit. Horse has won from just off the lead. That was breaking the maiden 2 starts back. Came in, took on Open N1X company most recently. Far from disgraced, only beaten by a little more than 2 lengths. With the inside draw, is that any sort of a concern for you in these short distance races where you would imagine the speeds are going to try to get over, clear and move to the rail? Is there any concern about pulling some sort of a trip from down there?
Yeah, there's always the concern that he's got to hope that he's going to find a hole when one of the 4 or the 5, kind of pig her a little bit. But he ran the rail last time, and that the horse on the lead just had really soft fractions, and nobody was with him. So he couldn't really get to that horse. But he's got the same post, same level. He always gets bet a little bit. Saffie Joseph's got a big jockey upgrade here, I think. In terms of the win percentage of the jockeys. And again, I just think Fully Loaded will probably be, under 2 to 1. And we don't have morning lines here. And I just think the 1 horse might offer some value. But again, he's going to have to find a seam between the 4 and the 5, or if the 4 comes off the rail or something.
And you bring up the price of this horse. Like you say, he's always bet a little bit, but has never gone off post-time favorite yet in 4 lifetime starts. Do you have sort of a line in the sand saying if this horse goes off at a price below what I think is, or whatever I deem is acceptable, then I'll pass? Or how do you approach your gambling overall?
I usually do have some kind of line in my head. Like the race that I wanted to get on the show, Rinaldi was 6 to 1 the morning line. It got bet down to 8 to 5. So I wouldn't bet that horse 8 to 5. I thought the horse made some, had value at 6 to 1, even 4 or 5 to 1. But at 8-5, I actually didn't bet that horse. So there are certain levels that, actually sometimes you like to see the action because, maybe some money's on it, some smart money's on it, but too much action takes away the value, and then I pass. So.
And do you have anything in mind right now, sort of that line of demarcation where you would get off?
I think if he's under 7-2, I think 7-2 would be like the one I'm looking for. Because again, I think that depends how much they bet the 9 horse fully loaded.
I think that's fair. 7-2. That translates to roughly 22% as far as probability is concerned. And you're looking at a horse who, on paper, has every right to improve yet again. And the trip that you've laid out, I think, is one that would work to your advantage, where you're not up there on the engine pushing things, but you're also not coming from 100 out of it. So I think Get the Money Bernie is definitely an intriguing runner in here, and we're not dealing with the favorite in a spot like this. So Jerry Richman, you're sticking to the inside, going to go with Get the Money Bernie, roughly in that 7-2 range. Before I let you go, any thoughts overall on the Classic division as we go closer and closer to the Breeders' Cup? We're only, about 7 weeks out now at this point. I know the Preakness still has to be run here in a couple weeks, but the defection of Honor AP, he probably would have been sort of a middle of the pack as far as price is concerned type of horse for the Classic. Do you have any opinion right now on that race?
It's hard. I really don't know what to make of Maximum Security in the Baffert barn. If I just don't know if those fields he's been beating out in Del Mar are weak or what. But I was initially kind of glad that Tom Stay Todd lost to Improbable. I was hoping that might help his odds come Breeders' Cup Classic Day, but I haven't heard much about it. I'm not sure what their plans are. I think they're going to run him. Where they're running him next.
Well, they had discussed the Jockey Club Gold Cup, but then I had heard they were talking about possibly training him right up to the race, and I don't know for certain. I'll look it up, and I'll speak about it after this segment here. I don't know that he's worked recently, which is definitely a bit of a red flag.
Right, that's what I'd heard, that someone might say he might have an owie. He's always had a horse. He's always been a horse that doesn't have a lot of starts and has always had a lot of time off. So that's concerning. So I'm going to have to find another horse maybe.
We'll wait and see. We've got a little bit of time left. I think if he gets back on the tab here relatively quickly, I think we'll be okay. But you can't wait too much longer, especially against a group like this. It looks like, anyway, on paper, it should be one of the better Classics we've seen as far as depth is concerned in a number of years here. Jerry Richman, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being flexible and amenable as far as doing this on a Tuesday, a week and a half after you actually won. Really appreciate it. Are you on Twitter?
No, I'm a dinosaur. I have no social media presence. I'm an old fart.
You know what? It's probably for the best. Social media is a cesspool. You don't need to worry about that stuff. Jerry, thank you so much for the time. Good luck this weekend, and hopefully we see you back on here again soon.
Thank you, Matt. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Jerry Richman for helping out with this week's Friday feature. And again, if you want to be in Jerry's position next Monday, you need to leave your selection beneath the video player here on YouTube. Again, one horse. You can only use one. Has to be on YouTube. And the race is Gulfstream 7th on Friday. I'm saying it as slowly and calmly as I can. Race 7 at Gulfstream, Friday afternoon. 5 furlongs on turf. Beneath the video player on YouTube. Leave your selection. You can get involved with the Friday feature next Monday. All right, let's get it going again. A couple just quick Q&A pieces, and it'll sort of roll into the Breeders' Cup Classic discussion. Let's first start off with Honor AP. Unfortunately, has been retired. He has some sort of a tendon issue. You know, it's unfortunate because to me he's going to be one of those horses, and there are every year or two there is that sort of horse where you say, I have no idea what they could have been. All he was to me is a really talented horse that his accomplishments aren't vast. Put it that way. I mean, he won the Santa Anita Derby. He defeated Authentic, who went on to win the Kentucky Derby. Great. Outside of that, there's really not a lot of meat there. Other than he looks great, other than he's got great breeding, I will never know what he could have been. And that's a little bit disappointing, but, you know, it happens. That's racing. And he's always been an ouchie type. So this shouldn't be a stunner that the horse comes down with some sort of a soft tissue injury. But Hopefully he ends up being a good stallion. I have no reason to believe he won't, but then again, I am probably the last person you should listen to as far as breeding, actual, like what people look for in a stallion, because I don't deal with any of that stuff. It doesn't really make a difference to me one way or the other, but it's just a shame that we lose him in the midst of this fascinating run up to the Breeders' Cup Classic. So Honor AP is out. Hopefully he goes off and becomes a nice stallion. Let's talk about some of the questions and comments and things of that nature from last week. Again, leave them beneath the video player. You know the drill by now. Zach Skurlock. Hey, Matt, what past performance video service do you use for handicapping? I wouldn't call it a past performance service, but there's a few different ways you can go about it. I use a service called RTN. You get unlimited replays, and I also have it for the live feed. I just prefer it in HD like that, and it's all right there. It's very clickable. Can also throw it on the TV if I want to use the Roku app, or the app that is on Roku. So I enjoy RTN. I know some other folks enjoy other pieces that are out there. I'm also not opposed to just using the video function in Formulator. I use predominantly to do most of my down and dirty stuff, Formulator for stats and charts and things like that from the daily racing form. Strictly speaking, from a speed figure standpoint, I'm a little bit more partial to the Timeform US numbers, but I firmly believe you need at least two figures to sort of compare and contrast. And my two are the sort of defaults for many people. Timeform US and the Buyer speed figures. I think those are the two of the most accurate ones available. And really that's all you can ask for in a speed figure is accuracy. So I couple those sort of pieces with a service like RTN. It's very easy to find rtn.tv. They have all sorts of different subscriptions and things like that you can take a look at. But that's what I use to watch replays and things of that nature. The other beautiful thing about that is you get HD. Not all tracks have it, but you get HD head-on replays, which is very chef's kiss. Let's go to Alex Kibrick. And this is also going to sort of dovetail. We'll go from Alex Kibrick's last piece in his comment to Jody Powers. Alex Kibrick's last comment, one race that went under the radar this weekend was the Woodward. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on Global Campaign and where he fits in the Breeders' Cup Classic picture. And then we transition down to Jody Powers. She had mentioned a comment about, I shouldn't say she necessarily, I believe it's she, but about Honor AP. Obviously that part's gone. What do you think about Gamine going into the sprint? I think she's better off than the Filly and Mare sprint, but that's another story. And the top 5 for the Classic now. Thank you to everyone for commenting and whatnot. Let's start off with the Woodward specifically, and then I'll pivot into my Breeders' Cup Classic top 10. I thought it was a terrible loss for Tacitus. Now, I also need to throw the caveat out there that I didn't watch all of the races from Saratoga that day on the main track. So I don't know offhand if there was a bias or anything like that, because it didn't really look like there was a hell of a lot of passing that went on. Having said that, Tacitus, he's just the ultimate tease. And maybe he'll be the horse that ends up somehow jumping up in a big way. He'll love Keeneland, and he'll go and get all the money in the Classic. But I'm done with him. I can't trust him to show up with his big effort. I don't know why he fired the shot that he did at Belmont Park in June or whenever it was. And then he came here with this. It was just one of those where I'm looking at it like, God, just go by. And Global Campaign is always hinted at being a good horse. Global Campaign's also an incredibly ouchy horse. And he never changed leads at any point. To me, he is not good enough to do that and beat better horses. It's one thing to do that against Tacitus. It's another thing to do that against Maximum Security, Improbable, Tom's d'Etat, By My Standards, Tis the Law, Authentic. I mean, you name it. You got to be better than that. And he's another horse that if he wins, I'll lose. I personally, I would rather see Global Campaign in a race like the Dirt Mile. I think he'd have a hell of a lot better chance. But if they went to the Classic with him, I don't think he's not a horse that I right now am looking at seriously. Now, as far as my classic top 10 is concerned, the one that I had to submit this week, unfortunately, it's already old because this came out and I submitted it before the news of Honor AP being retired. But I will run down my top 10 right now. And I'm sure some people are going to roll their eyes when they hear it because it really has not changed a tremendous amount from way back when. Number 1, I have Tom's D'Etat. Number 2, I have Improbable. Number 3, 'Tis the Law. Number 4, Maximum Security. Number 5, By My Standards. Number 6, Authentic. Number 7, Art Collector. 8, Code of Honor. 9, unfortunately, the now retired Honor AP. And 10, I put Global Campaign in there. And I was really torn between throwing him in there or leaving Midnight Bisou, who I've had 10th basically from jump. I am, and I'll talk about it a little bit when I talk about football and whatnot. It blows my mind how much people love and overreact to the most recent thing that they've seen. And maybe I'm stubborn where I'm not immediately willing to just drink the Kool-Aid and say, oh, that must be it. But I've seen too many of these things happen before where all of a sudden a horse will win. And I kept using the college football analogy from a few weeks back. When one team doesn't play, unless something that another team does is so outrageous and based on the competition that it warrants leapfrogging a team that was ahead of them when they didn't even play, I don't understand the rationale behind that. So for me to sit here and say, because Authentic won the Kentucky Derby against 3-year-old restricted company in gate-to-wire fashion, now he goes to the top of the list ahead of the older horses, the more proven horses, that to me, ahead of 'Tis the Law, who I believe 'Tis the Law is a better racehorse than Authentic is. I'm not arguing with you if you firmly believe that the race that Authentic ran in the Kentucky Derby makes him the best horse in training. That's your opinion. I think it's a little bit wild that one race all of a sudden means that he's the best when you consider all of the pieces that go along with it. And we've seen it time and time again where just looking at this list, initially it started off with when Tom's D'Etat won the race at Churchill, he was the leader. And then when Improbable won the Whitney, he went to number 1. And then when Maximum Security, or when 'Tis the Law, won, or whoever ran first, 'Tis the Law or Maximum Security, they went to number 1. And then the other horse went to number 1. And I'm sure Authentic is going to be toward the top of this list on the heels of the Derby. Where was he last week? Let's see. Let me see if I can find it. Maybe I can't. He was number 4 last week. So, I feel like people get very, very locked into what they just most recently saw. And I just feel like that's a dangerous thing because recency bias is a real thing. And I just think you need to be very, very, and unless you really firmly believe these things, but don't just automatically say what just happened has to be gospel. It's the same way with the past performances. If you look and say, if you only went off of the last race, I know some people think it's undervalued. I think it can be overvalued. In reality, it's probably somewhere in the middle because there are circumstances for everything. I know that's not the sexy answer, but I think that's the truth. I think just we all get sucked into what that most recent thing is that we saw. I think you do need to sort of draw that line in the sand, though, and say, all right, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture as opposed to just what's right here in front of us. So that's my top 10 right now. Of the top 10, who am I looking at as legitimately a threat to win the Classic, in my opinion, from my top 10 that I have? I would say 4/5 horses. And they're also not the top 4 or 5 necessarily. No, I guess 6 actually. I think Tom Zita can win. I think Improbable can win. I think Tis the Law can win. I think Maximum Security can win. I'm wishy-washy on By My Standards as much as I love him. The Classic, I'm wishy-washy on Authentic. And I'm unsure, leaning a little bit toward yes on Art Collector, but it's still too early. So that's my initial sort of just eyeball of the Classic. I feel like it's a very open affair. I don't think there is any slam dunk in here right now, at least not to my opinion. Maybe one of you out there disagrees. Let me know beneath the video player on YouTube if you think there's an absolute cinch right now for the Classic. If I had to guess, the folks that think there's a cinch, they're probably going to go with Maximum Security, which to date, I don't know that I can really argue with you, but that's how we're looking at the Classic and things at this moment. Questions, comments, concerns, again, beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter at @Bernie_Matt. Let's transition into some golf and some football for this upcoming weekend. Let's button this up with some golf and some football. I get it. Some of you don't really care much about this, but there are many of you who ask throughout the week, whether it's on Twitter, and some people have in the past asked about it beneath the video player. Football season's back. It's been something I've talked about here in this show going back to when we started it at the Racing Form. So that's going to continue. May not look exactly the same. I'm going to talk about it much more loosely than I did sort of the trifecta. And with the golf, for anybody that's followed me on Twitter, that's more or less what I talk about than anything on there, as opposed to racing or whatever else it may be. So let's start off with the golf, just because it's a little bit more timely, I think. It's kind of one of those things where you can look at it so many different ways. I've said it to anyone that'll listen. Golf is sort of the untapped great betting product that there is. It's on par. Think of it this way. It's on par, no pun intended, with a Breeders' Cup every week, because there are so many of these individuals that can go out and win at any time. They're all great players. You can get unbelievable prices on some of these guys. Now, their probability may be considerably smaller because the field is much larger, but you can still get great odds on guys who, again, if we were going to compare it to a horse race, you're dealing with Breeders' Cup Classic caliber runners. You're just dealing with more options. And you can get good prices still. Your favorite this week, I believe, is 8-1 in Dustin Johnson. John Rahm's right there around 9-1, 10-1, depending on what you're looking at. To me, the shorter prices anyway, the one that was most, I don't want to say interesting, the one that I ended up going with, I have a little bit on Justin Thomas at 12-1. His big problem is, it seems like anyway, in crunch time, that giant miss can show up one way or the other, right or left. Otherwise, he's nails. He's got everything that you could possibly want, especially at an event like this, a U.S. Open. He's won a PGA already. There's nothing really to knock other than that giant miss shows up from time to time. That's a little bit of a concern. So, but of the shorter prices, I like him. I think Webb Simpson's got a big chance. 25-1, I'm fine with that. He's just steady as steady does. Doesn't really make any mistakes. Doesn't do anything brilliant. He's not the flashiest player, but he's rock solid. He's already won a U.S. Open. And it just feels like this is going to be one of those events where, okay, maybe it's not going to be the U.S. Open. The beautiful thing about that is, obviously, the sort of premium is placed on par for the most part. We've seen a couple of Opens over the past handful of years, Pebble being the one that comes to mind, obviously most recently, where they were well under par. But typically, you're looking right around that 1 under, 2 under, 3 under, all the way up to 3, 4, 5 over kind of range. And a player like Webb Simpson is the kind of guy who it feels like, okay, maybe he's going to give up 15, 20, 30 yards to the bombers, the Rahms, the Rorys, the DJs, the Koepkas and of the world. But he's not going to have just the disaster hole, or he's very unlikely to have that. His short game is strong. His approach, which I think is going to be kind of the key to this week, is from that sort of 175 in kind of range. He's as good as anyone. So he's 25-1, not a great number, but I think it's fair. Hideki's the one that I have a hard time with because I like him a lot. And I guess if I needed to make a pick, it would be Matsuyama. The problem has been well documented if you listen to any golf sort of analysis anywhere. I mean, he seemingly has all the tools, but his putting is just so dramatically inferior to what most of the other pros are bringing to the table, which is kind of surprising because if you're someone who looks at a stat like strokes gained, it's really difficult to screw up on the green when it comes to professionals. Very unlikely that you're going to be giving up a ton or gaining a ton one way or the other. And somehow he just continues to suck at putting. And, and it's all relative, obviously. He's a hell of a lot better putter than I am, but it's not saying much. He's 33-1. If he has a hot week with the putter, I mean, anything's possible. One of these weeks, he's going to have a week where he's just putting lights out for whatever reason, and he's going to go and get the job done because all the other tools are there to be among the top 5 in the world. He just, that putter seemingly lets him down more often than not. He's sort of the middling price that I found the most interesting at 33. If you're looking for a bomber, if you're looking for just a couple of bucks here or there, I feel like a guy who, based on some of the other pieces that you can use as far as analysis is concerned, looking at common courses that sort of translate well, you can look over on datagolf.ca. They have fantastic sort of statistical pieces and models that you can use and look through. A guy who is a giant price, who has played well at very common courses or similar courses. He doesn't do any one thing awesome, but he really doesn't do anything poorly. He's 300-1. I think Adam Hadwin's going to have a decent week, and I've got him everywhere. I've got him top 40, top 20, top 10, top 5, and to win. Is he a likely winner? No, far from it. But I feel like there are enough positives here to make a case for a 300-1 shot. This goes back to the whole she dares the devil piece. Has he ever really contended at an event this size, of this caliber? No, but at 300-1, I'm willing to find out. If we're talking about somebody who is trying to do this who's 20-1, it's a different story. And even having said that, 20-1 is still a good number, but when you consider the size of the field, it's all, again, everything's relative. So Adam Hadwin was the one that I took a little bit of a token flyer on at 300-1. My pick would be Hideki. Of the shorter prices, I think JT is the right way to go, but those are some names maybe you want to consider, and let me know what you guys think. If any of you are into golf, bet on it, play DFS, any of that kind of stuff, let me know beneath the video player. And as far as the NFL goes this week, again, I'm not going to do it in the same vein as the way I used to do it. It's going to be much more sort of free form. It's difficult when we're this far out from some of the games. This is being recorded on Tuesday. We don't know what injury reports look like. The whole COVID thing is an entirely different animal. We'll wait and see how that affects things. But just based on the numbers that were out there right now, the one that I was most intrigued with, I took them at -7 coming up on Sunday. The Cardinals at home against Washington. Washington, the difficult thing this early in the season, going back to what I was talking about earlier in the show, the idea of people overreacting to the most recent thing that they saw. A lot of love for Washington, a lot of love for Arizona. I think the difference is, coming into this season, there was reason to believe Arizona was going to be pretty good. I believe they ended last season 7-9 or 6-10, one of the two, but they were trending the right way toward the end of the year. Their defense, I think, is better than maybe but collectively everyone, maybe would have thought initially. Obviously, the addition of DeAndre Hopkins makes life a lot easier for Kyler Murray, but Murray's mobility is always going to make a team like that dangerous. I know -7 is a big number, but that was at even money, and I'm not convinced. I need to see more to believe that this Washington thing is not just a one-week piece. And the other part for me with that is, I don't know that, was it more Washington improving, or is Philadelphia just kind of overrated? And I felt that way last year, and I'm not even going to pile on to the Carson Wentz thing. I just don't know how good they actually are. Now, they were shorthanded. There's no denying that, but I'm just not convinced that they're all that in a bag of chips. So, -7 for me, Arizona at home. And again, home field, I don't know how much of a difference that really is going to make this year with the lack of crowds early on anyway, with the exception of those few stadiums that have had them. But so Arizona -7, that's where I went at even money against the team from Washington. Then if you wanted to get a little bit more creative, I got a 14 parlay and a 14 teaser. Let's start off with the parlay. I took and I bought a couple points here and there just to kind of jimmy the numbers around. Arizona, I bought a half point to get that down to -6.5. Parlayed them with the Bengals on Thursday night. The line itself is +6 that I saw. I got it up to 7.5. I just don't believe that there's that much of discrepancy between both teams, between Cleveland and Cincinnati. And that doesn't mean that I think they're both good or bad. I actually think they're both decent. I think sort of the Cleveland debut, in week one against Baltimore was more, Baltimore I think is a bit of a juggernaut, and Cleveland just couldn't get out of their own way. And I thought Cincinnati played pretty well, and I tweeted it out afterward. For his first game, given the lack of sort of preparation compared to what he typically would have had for his rookie year, or going into it anyway, I thought Joe Burrow looked really good, all things considered. Now you add in, he's going to get a little bit more of a rapport with Boyd and with A.J. Green. Joe Mixon, I'm kind of getting sick of his act. I just don't think I don't feel like he's taken that really big step that I thought he was going to when he finally came out of school, but neither here nor there. So I moved the Bengals up to 7.5. That's at -155. The Bills at the Dolphins. The Bills game against the Jets and the Dolphins game up here last weekend against the Patriots, to me, I feel like they kind of mirrored one another in that I'm sure a lot of people looked at the final scores, and I get it, Buffalo won probably more handily than New England did against Miami, Buffalo against the Jets. But Buffalo had the game absolutely on lock. And I think it was at the end of the first half, Josh Allen ended up trying to do some stupid thing. He fumbled the ball. Jets go down and score. Get a little bit of momentum early on in the second half, go down and score again. I don't think the game was nearly as close as the score would indicate. And I know some people want to argue that the Dolphins game against the Pats was actually closer than it was. Same deal. If N'Keal Harry doesn't fumble the ball into the end zone, it's 21-3, and I don't think there's any chance that Miami even makes it remotely close. Another thing for those that didn't really pay attention or don't live up here, don't really care about the Patriots, whatever that may be, there was like a 4th and 12 early in the fourth quarter that was converted to prolong a drive where they ultimately went down and scored. I don't think that game was nearly as close as it would suggest. So to me, even though they're on the road, even though there's probably going to be some fans in Miami, I think Buffalo -6 is pretty cut and dry. I'd be very surprised if Miami kept it too much less than that. And the only other one that I threw in there, bought a half point on this game. This one could come back to bite me in the rear end. It did on Sunday. I took the Colts -2.5. And again, I bought that half point, so it's down to -135 at home against the Vikings. The Vikings defense looked like Swiss cheese, granted against Aaron Rodgers. But with the Colts, it feels like, or to me anyway, I know he made a lot of the similar mistakes or the similar sort of plays that he did when he was out in San Diego or LA, whatever you want to call him. I still call him San Diego. I'd like to think that Rivers, with some time, is going to improve. I know they lost Marlon Mack, but they've got the kid Taylor, who a lot of people like. I didn't know anything about him because I don't really watch college football anymore, but all my friends told me he's seemingly the goods. Naheem Hines, I don't know if I really, I dabbled with Naheem Hines last year as sort of an emergency flex in some of my fantasy leagues. That was hit or miss. But I like the receivers that they have. T.Y. Hilton is still sort of, he's not underrated, but I feel like he fits in there very well as sort of your Larry Fitzgerald role, where he'll, from a few years back, where he's not necessarily the game breaker anymore, but he's pretty reliable. I like Paris Campbell. I think Paris Campbell is legit. I think he's healthy now, and hopefully he can continue on building on that good week one after sort of an injury-filled first year coming from Ohio State. So I think Indy's good. Maybe I'll be proven wrong about them, but I'm going to ride that wave. So that's the 4-team parlay there. Cardinals -6.5, and again, this is with buying a couple points. Cardinals -6.5, Bengals +7.5, Bills -6, Colts -2.5, and then just for ha-has, threw out a big teaser, buying 6 points with those same 4 teams. So the Cardinals game effectively, well, it didn't really move to a pick 'em because it's -1, so that could, but again, I just think they're better than Washington is. The Bengals to +12, the Bills to a proper pick 'em, and the Colts to +3. So there you have it. There's a little bit of NFL to kick things off here for the first time this year. Let me know thoughts about the league, about teams, whatever it may be, beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter. at Bernier_Matt. Thank you again, Jerry Richman. That's going to wrap up episode 32. However you listen to this thing, thank you for doing so. A number of ways, whether you're over on the podcast apps, whether it's Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, however it may be over there, your Android device, inthemoneypodcast.com, or if you're over on YouTube, in that search bar, Matt Bernier Show. This episode and the 31 prior episodes will all be over there. Please rate, review, and subscribe however you listen. I'll be back next Monday. Again, don't forget Saturday, Sunday. I believe it's 5 o'clock Eastern. NBCSN in conjunction with TVG. I'll be on there talking about some Woodbine racing, some win and you're in action for the Breeders' Cup. Breeders' Cup's right around the corner. Just a few more weeks left. I'll probably start diving into that a little bit more next week as well. You want to get involved in the Friday feature next week, again, make sure beneath the video player on YouTube is Gulfstream's 7, that 5 furlong turf race. Until next Monday, best of luck however you play, whatever you play, wherever you play. It's been episode 32 of the Matt Bernier Show.